We're going to quickly take some questions. Are there any questions, comments?
Questions, man.
Questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. K, for writing the book. And I think I understand it would have been painful to read and also to hear it read to you, just reliving it. But I don't know if you heard recently of someone. Obviously, I don't expect you to answer it, but I'm just curious where your mind is at. So recently, after the Queen's passing, someone made very extreme statements concerning her based on based on the war. And I think there were different sides to it, the different understandings that as to whether people were entitled not just to have those feelings, that's one thing, but also to make very extreme remarks about somebody else, especially in such sensitive during such a sensitive period. And I'm wondering if when you saw that, or if you saw that, if that affected, or if that maybe raised any thoughts in your mind as to if they were not necessarily entitled to, but the understanding that maybe that's where they're coming from, just the terrible things that happened during the war could evoke such emotions.
Yeah.
I was trying to say it in the least crass way, so I hope you understand what I meant.
Thank you so much. I think that's one of the most relevant questions that I've taken. I haven't taken many this evening, but you just got me right there because I was in the midst of the whole controversy. I've never met must be Uju Anya professor. I think she's a hero, in my opinion. I don't think she said anything extreme at all. I mean, I don't want to tell you what I said right after she said what she said, because I'm doing a new book now. I'm writing it, and it's growing. It's called Try Being Black for Just One Day. And this book is about, it's non-fictional and fictional. It starts from when the British came to our shores and captured our able-bodied men and women, sold them into slavery. We built Europe, we built America. Your uncles, your great-great-grand-uncles, brothers and sisters, why would you leave your shores and come to our zone and enslave us and call us niggers and put us in the back house? And look at how they left Nigeria. When they left in 1960, my father apparently was in the movement. He was imprisoned a few times. And I was a child, is in my book, and I talked about it. And I have no sympathy for anyone who participated in those atrocities against us. I think the reason why Black people are backward today is because we are accommodating of the nonsenses from the past. You know, that the Queen died, fine. Let them mourn her. Their family can mourn. I don't think I will stand in a place to mourn her, knowing what they did to the colonies, to us Black people, to Nigeria, particularly to us, the Igbo people. I mean, you can see where people are boasting, yes. Yeah, the English people put us above everyone else, even when we were not qualified. They made us leaders of Nigeria. They planned it. Harold Wilson. You can just Google it. You see where they're confessing today. They hated us because they believed that we were uppity. We were not compromising. Igbo man didn't care. All he cared about was to wake up and go to work and make. They didn't care if you were white. We didn't suffer food paradise, no inferiority complex. So they hated us because they didn't have any means through Nigeria by us to exploit us. We didn't accept them where they came. So the Queen dying and wearing a crown of gold and diamond that they stole from us, and I will mourn her, makes me a stupid person, basically. And, you know, the lady may have said it in such an inelegant way, but she's a hero, in my opinion. And she spoke the truth, and we need to start telling these people to leave us the hell alone. They are still meddling in our politics. If you don't know it today, they sit down there and plan. How do we keep these people down so that we can keep exploiting them? I think there's something inhuman in the white skin. So when I finish my book, you will see. And my personal experience is going to graduate school in America and interacting with white people. Where do you start? We've suffered racism. We've suffered uncountable things that, you know, that the Queen dying, what they did to their in-laws, to their daughters-in-laws, It's in the open. So now, for me, answering your question, I even feel more aggrieved than that professor. But being that, I want to be a bit, not forgiving, yes, I've forgiven her for what she did to us, but I'm not going to come out in the open and begin to abuse her. My wife would not tolerate that from me. And, but if I was left alone to run free, oh my goodness, the pain would wake up and be running naked on the streets. Yes. Yes. But thank you for that question. I hope I was able to answer it.
I don't know if you saw the follow-up that someone did asking people to begin with Okay's book as a because this is a teaching moment, like he said. We owe whoever opened up the conversation, a debt of gratitude for basically saying, hey, there is a need to remember. Because there is a need to remember. And of course, remembering is not, it's not something, we're not going to laugh all over it and all that. It's going to be painful. But the reality is, in Igbo tradition, we used to have rites of passage. It was a West that really, really clinicalized pain and pleasure in the way that they became polar opposites. In our own culture, they are flip sides of the same coin. So, you'll be remembering, you'll be crying, but it is a learning, it is a healing process. Eventually, you get to where you need to go. And that's really my greatest gratitude to Okay, is that I'm embarrassed to say it, but his is the first book on Biafra I've ever read. And I haven't even finished it. I still haven't finished it because of how painful it is. And I'm not alone. There are many people like me who lost their childhood to this, Is there an other person in the room besides our in-laws? Okay, so why are we preaching to the choir? What is it that? And I strongly believe that until we own our past, we have no idea, we have no compass for the kind of future we need to build. How are you going to? I know how much. I think if you ask Google can even give you a rough estimate of how much America invests into making Americans Americans. You can't wish a nation into existence. That's why it's called nation building. Nation building, it's not about infrastructure. It's about pain, suffering, yes, growth. At the end of the day, we have refused to learn from this stuff. And we think it's an Igbo agenda, and we think that Okay is provocative, and we call people names, and so on and so forth. It's just, this is mindlessness. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, all. I read Okay's book, and not just that I've read it, I also had it on my show. But I dare say that I think this book, for me, I think it's just about 30% forgiveness, and rather 70% healing. I don't know how we can talk about forgiveness when the perpetrators have not helped us to heal. So there's a disconnect. So for me, I think this book came at the right time, not so much so that we can forgive, because in the book, there's Asaba there, there is Agbo there. Now, my place is between both towns. I'm from Onuchubo. And immediately after Agbo is Onuchubo. So I personally think that Biafra the book itself is not so much so for forgiveness, but for us to continue to read, and perhaps we'll get to a point where the country itself would help us to heal. Because without healing, there can't be true forgiveness.
Thank you very much.
And this is born more out of curiosity than anything. Can you tell us the story behind this cover picture?
I would not tell you that. It's part of the curiosity that will die with me.
Oh, but it's
I told you this before. So you think you can use this crowd now to elicit an answer? It is just part of what would die with the book.
Well, this is a question that's this is a question that's probably tongue in the cheek. You talked about the movie. When is it coming out?
I'll direct that question to the movie director in this room, Bala Atta. And we began to make a movie is a serious business. And, the movies that my wife watches, and she has dragged me into watching, are Igbo movies. I think we watched about 10 in the last 3 or 4 days. She says she uses it to learn her Igbo, but I think she likes the acting. But to make a movie is a serious, serious business. We began to write a script, which runs into like the movie would be something else. I mean, I know it, and I don't want it to be just a movie. It would tell a lot of stories. We'll make a movie that will be on the Oscar platform. Why do I say that? I say it because 50% of what will be in the movie is not even in the book. Can I tell you one grotesque? Eating of human flesh took place in Biafra. It would be part of the movie. So if you don't have the stomach, don't look forward to the movie. And it would be a movie that would turn the heads of the entire world. So I'm looking for the right platform. Someone has offered me some millions of dollars, Bola knows about it, to make this movie. But I don't think that's the right approach. We'll take our time, even if it takes 10 years, to write a good script, to find good actors, to find just a few, maybe a month ago, someone told me that Jimmy Lee, what's his name? Jimmy Fox was looking to move 3 houses from my house. I said, good. When he moves, we'll be talking. And next door to me, a Hollywood screenwriter, not a small one, and a white lady bought a house next to my house. And now we're friends. She's reading the book presently. So God is putting everything together. And, when I say it, people just say, oh, which God? There's God. God's hand is in this book from the way I began to write it. I never wanted to write this story. And it just happened that my daughter called me once and said, Dad, help me. I'm doing an assignment in university. I need 1 or 2 pages on Biafra. Didn't you say you went to that war? I said, yes, I did. And she said, help me. I don't know anything about it. So I wrote 2 or 3 pages and I sent to her. And she took it to her class. And her professor said, wow, who wrote this? Said, my father. He's a good writer. So I sent it to a few friends, including Oken Dibe, the man, my cousin. I consider him to be one of the, best writers out of this continent. And I sent it to him. He screamed and said, what are you waiting for? You have to write this book. He kept bugging me, write it, write it. So one night I woke up, I began to write. You know how you start? Once upon a time, I started it and I put it away. But then we wrote it by the grace of God. And now the movie would come up that way as well. The whole strings are being tied. So there'll be a movie. Anybody who likes to act, get ready. It will be local actors mixed with some foreign actors, but it will be a great movie. Because every page in this story, in this book, every page tells a story. It's not, you can never, if you like to read, I mean, every now and then I pick it up and I'm wondering, did I write this? And, I have the handwritten ones. I'm compiling it to keep it to sell for my grandchildren when I'm gone. So every page, you turn it, there's a story. There's a story. I mean, we couldn't even read some of the nice portions of this book because of time. But every page, there's a story. There's a story. Story about the war. Story about starvation. Story about killings. Story about love. All in this book. So it would be a great movie. Yeah.
So, did you ever attempt to go back to those landmarks, those places that, for instance, where you said you met Charlie Nweke's parents and they told you, because I suppose it's an unmarked grave. Sometimes we want to do closure and then we want to visit those sites that resonates in our. Did you ever do any of those?
I
Or
I,
would you want to if you have not?
I don't think I would want to, but I have been to where I was born and raised in Kano. If you read the book, the beginning, you will hear the story about how my next door neighbor, brilliant, handsome doctor who just returned from Johns Hopkins, was killed. You know, he was a bachelor and had a beautiful car, and I would go rob the car. The car was smooth American. I think it was a Pontiac. And the last time that I went, the first time I went to Kano after the war, the first place I went was our home. I mean, I went there. The people who were there didn't know who I was because they had taken over the house. So I stood in front of where I was born. My father built that house, I think a year before I was born. So I stood in front of that house and I had goosebumps. I looked and I came to the door. I think it was some Hausa person who was living in part of it, said to me, Mekana so, meaning, what do you want? I said, this is my house. He began to laugh. This was after the war. I went to Kano. I said, this was my house. I was born in this house. He said, really, you an Igbo man? I said, yes. And to the left of our house was the house where the Kano doctor, the Igbo doctor, was killed. And I looked at it. It came to my mind. Reflection. And now, when I sleep sometimes, I still see those images. I remember the image of me looking at the dead man because they laid him in front of near his garage, busted up, blood all over the place, and I was barely 10 years, 11. And there I was looking at a dead person. You know how difficult it was to see even a casket in the 60s? You couldn't sleep for a week. So those memories are still there. But I don't know if I can begin to go back to Olo. And if I could, maybe someday I will. But kidnappers may grab me.
That would be the subject of another.
Another book.
Let me just, you know, social change movements, the book becomes a catalyst, and then, you know, while we're waiting for the next 10 years for the movie to come, we can all do our own consciousness raising, you know, especially amongst our friends who this is very difficult for them. I call okay brother, but this not reading this book almost, he would have, I finally summoned up the courage, you know. So some of those people who say there's a different side to the story, that, you know, they respect you, they can listen to you and all that. And let's begin to have a conversation about this stuff. Let's just begin to have a conversation, you know, about how to build this nation. And unless we look back, it'll be very difficult for us to see what's ahead of us. So I encourage everybody who's here, you know, even if you don't have a copy of the book, you can download the YouTube where someone has read. You know, you can reach out to your friends and say, what do you know about Biafra? It's a tragedy that it's not taught in, you know, schools, or it wasn't taught in schools for a while. I hear they've brought back history. I don't know from whose perspective that it's being taught, but let's at least begin to have a conversation about how we can build character and strengths. I believe that Biafra is one of the reasons why disputes are almost always terminal in Nigeria. We don't have dispute resolution skills. It's not anything. I mean, when in the United States, if I see anybody huffing and puffing, I know that must be a Nigerian. And if you really, really look closely, that's a Nigerian, because we don't have dispute resolution skills. Disputes do not have to be terminal, and we could learn from this. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me in here. And I remember reading this book and going through so much shock at the horrors that were witnessed, you know, during such a time. I could only imagine the amount of strength you had, you know, having to put all of this down to paper and even share that part of history with the rest of us. Even just sitting down here, it's something I truly appreciate, because we don't have much, you know, in terms of records of what has actually happened. And so reading it, I can't imagine how much, even once the film has been, you know, released, how much it would do for our generation. And hopefully, and most certainly should change how we interrelate with one another, in the future. I definitely see this movie, making a better Nigeria and making a better us, a better future. So I'd like to say, thank you so much for, the strength that you had to record, such, through perilous times and teaching about, forgiveness above all. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I needed to hear the voice of younger women.
Thank you very much, okay? So what I just wanted to say was I wanted to pick up on what Prof said, because we don't have dispute resolution here. If we have problems in Nigeria, we either laugh it off, make it into a joke, a skit, or whatever. I think it's a coping mechanism that we have, but we actually never deal with the problems that we have. And that's why these things keep on recurring and recurring and recurring. And we think that we're always going to be safe. But I don't think we are, because if you listen to the Lebanese, they keep talking about how this is how their country first started. You talk to the Rwandans, you hear this is how their country first started. What needs to happen before people actually realize that this excessive, you are this and I'm that, tribal kind of conflicts that we think of, it starts off as a joke and then it now escalates. I'm from Benin. I mean, I've been called Igbo since I don't know, whenever. But I remember as a kid, I used to hear about even the war. I think I was born 1968. And of course, our bathrooms, everything were bombed. But I'm telling you, my parents used to tell these stories about how if in Benin, if you were upset with anybody, you would just say it's Igbo. And then he would be carried off and it's horrible when you hear what people had to go through. And I cannot even begin to imagine where you're coming from. But what I'm saying is that this is 50 something years later. Have we had any kind of going through and actually, like what you're talking about, a truce reconciliation or talking things through, not just hiding it? Like I have a pet peeve with, we call them agbalagbas, old people, right? Because they're never corrected. They continue to inflict some kind of pain and suffering or traditions or cultures that are actually damaging to a lot of people. And everybody says, because they're old. Why is there always a reason? Why can't we correct it so that our children can live a better and a safer future? Nigeria has turned to a place where I believe Nigeria is the land of milk and honey. That is what it was born for. I love the people, I love what it has, but it has turned to a war zone. Just because we're not carrying guns up and down the streets doesn't mean it's not a war zone, it's a war zone. So what is it? Does it have to come to us carrying guns before we actually do something about it? So thank you for opening this up. Thank you for letting us hear your story. And we pray that in our lifetime, in our children's lifetime, whatever it may be, this kind of thing will be discussed, dealt with, and let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to state a part of my book which dealt with what you just said. I didn't want it to be just a story of the war where I told it my story. It was my story. I tried as much as I could to stay away from the politics of the war. I touched it a bit, but I made it my story. And in telling my story, it got around. But at the end of the day, when I finished writing the book, I thought, you have to prefer solution. Otherwise, people will say, it's just full of criticizing. It doesn't have any solution. So I went back to something that I was fortunate to have been part of, the 2014 National Conference. During this period, for 4 months, I was appointed to lead the Igbo intelligentsia to the conference. And I thought it was a joke. And I spent 4 months in Abuja in a hotel room. I didn't even come back to Lagos because the work we did was huge. We dealt with all the constitutions of the country because that's where the problems are, inside those constitutions. These Abalaba people you mentioned manipulated the constitution so that they would benefit from it, either tribal or economic, and they destroyed our country. So during this conference, we sat down and I put it in my book. So I took an excerpt of it and I inserted in the book for anyone to see. We convinced the entire country. We had 6 zones. I came from the southeast. And principally, I wrote the because that was my field, politics and economics. So I wrote about the constitution, how to change it, to go back to regionalism or statism, where we can devolve powers to local government, to the hands of the people who own the country. Not for someone to sit in Abuja and tell the man who's producing the oil in Bayelsa how to spend his money. So we did all this stuff. Politicians destroyed it because they didn't, the people at the head said, oh, so I won't be powerful again. And that's where we can start solving our problems. If you have to go back to your region, to your state, to grow your own food, to police yourself, you don't bring a policeman from Sokoto, I keep saying it, to come and be the police commissioner in Anambra because there's a lot of bribery in Onitsha. He doesn't know the people, doesn't speak the language. He brings all his boys from Sokoto and they're running around. They don't even know how to communicate with the locals. So these were the things that we dealt with. And that would be the beginning of solving our problems. Once we go back to restructuring, which is what the politicians will tell us, oh, we're going to restructure. Once they get there, they realize that the man in Abuja will get only about 10% of the revenue to run external affairs, to run immigration. Simple, 10% of the revenue. The remaining 90% should go to the owners of the economy, should go to the states. So everybody will go back to their regions and you begin to grow your groundnut again. Because without it, you starve. You begin to grow your cocoa in the West. We grow our palm oil products in the East. And we become again a great nation like we were in the past. If we do not do these things, we're wasting our time. Truth and reconciliation, some people have etched in their minds that this country must be against certain people. So the best way to deal with this, the issues we have, is to restructure this country. Once we restructure the country, we go back to the basics and we begin to work hard. Without economics, the politics is messed up. Without politics, economics dead.
Yeah, just to mention that Dr. Oke has written other books. There's a book titled Contemporary African Art. For those of us who are on the arts, I know he's a grand patron of the arts. So, any other questions, comments? I think in the absence of, okay, here it is, Contemporary African Art. So if you're interested.
It's an old book. If you don't have a copy, you're an enemy.
So you heard it from Dr. Oke. So